The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we are webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. Today is Tuesday and it is December 4th, 2012. So thrilled to be with you here this morning. I want you to know how much it means to me to be here with you. We're going to be live for the next 2 hours talking about autism and how you and I can be more efficient, more effective working with our children on the autism spectrum. I'm really struck this morning by the fact that our paths are all different. Our journeys are all different, and we have different things that we have to do and different requirements. And I was writing earlier about the playing field, how this playing field is not level. And I want you to know that it's really important to me, first, that we take care of our kids right now, but that long range, we be working to level this playing field. But as I said, first priority is that we help our kids right now. You know, we had Lisa Ackerman from TACA on last week, and the name of her blog and the mission, sort of the, the subheading for TACA is Real Help Now. And I think that that's a really important thing for all of us to be focused on. And I want you to know that it's okay. It's like giving myself permission and giving you permission to help your child first. That's really what it's all about, is making sure that your child gets what they need. And I can tell you from the place that I am on this journey that I promised early on that we would help our child first. And that that was a really sacred promise to him. I used to say to him, I brought you into this world. I take responsibility for you. I'm going to do everything I can for you because I want to be able to look you in the eye and say that to you. But there were times when it really hurt my feelings because I thought, oh, but what about this other child? What about, all the other kids? And so the promise that I made, and I know a lot of parents that make this promise, I'll help my child first, and then I will turn around and help as many other families on this journey and other kids on this journey as I possibly can. So I want to give you permission to put your child first. And later on, whenever I can, I like to be of use to help you guys on this journey. That's where my path is now. I'm still helping my kid, but he doesn't need the intensive help that he needed at the beginning. So in any case, I want to remind all of you that this is meant to be an interactive conversation. We already have a comment that I'm going to answer in 1 second, but I want you guys to please participate in the conversation. Emily's going to cycle through some of the different ways that you can be talking with us. I want to remind you, though, that if you want to watch us live, autism-live.com is the place where you can find us. And we have a new site there that's going to look a little bit different, but there's still a box there that says Shannon is answering right now. That's your opportunity in the live forum to type whatever you'd like. You can write to me and say, Shannon, I'm mad today. I'm mad and I can't take it anymore. You can write and say, this is where I'm writing from, and I don't have the opportunities that you seem to have where you are. Let's talk about it, right? We are going to talk about it today. Or you can ask a question, and we're going to have BCBA, Board Certified Behavior Analyst, Evelyn Gould with us in the next hour. So if there's something specific that you want us to be talking about, I would love to know that. And again, you can write into that form in the live feature without logging in. There's no credit card information. We don't even know your name. You just get, it's instant gratification. We're going to be talking about reinforcement later on today. Instant gratification, you type in and it shows up here on my screen. So for instance, somebody has written in and said, "Hi Shannon, didn't get to see yesterday's show, but how do you get to see the live show now on autism-live.com? It should automatically be playing." If it's not, that's a problem. So, click your refresh and see if that doesn't make it start. But could you do me a favor? And, here I am in this conundrum. If you're not watching right now, then you're not getting this information. But let me know what your experience of it is, because it's brand new. It just launched yesterday. And if there's some bugs we need to iron out, this is my international symbol for ironing, then we'll do it. But you know how that is. Things aren't always, sometimes needs a little nip tuck to make it work. But isn't it a cool site? I want to know what you guys think about it. But hopefully you're able to watch us right now. But sometimes you might have to click that button more than once. I'd love to know if that's working for you. Okay. So we like to start every morning with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day, the jargon du jour. This is our time when we give you one word, one phrase, one anagram to help you to understand what it is and make sense of it with your child. And I laugh because this week we're featuring insurance jargon, and to me this is probably the seventh ring of you-know-what. It's not enough that we had to learn jargon that was for our kids, and then we had to learn jargon for psychology, and then we learned all the autism jargon, and then our kids went to school and we learned all the edu-speak alphabet land that I call it, and now it is essential, and it is essential that we learn the jargon for the insurance. But how do we do this? One little bit at a time. We cannot afford to get any more overwhelmed than we already are, right? And this insurance thing bears all the distinct markers of something that could overwhelm us. So we're not going to let it. We're going to hold hands on this and see if we can't make sense out of it. So I asked our insurance contract people to give me 5 different words or phrases that it would be really good for parents to know at this point in the game. So we're on number 2. Yesterday we talked about self-funded plans. Today we're talking about out-of-pocket maximums. Oh, doesn't this sound delightful? Right? This sounds like a colonic. It's what it feels like to me. Okay, so let's take a look at what our actual definition is. The maximum amount a family has to pay out of their pocket in co-payments, co-insurance, before the medical plan starts paying everything for the rest of the year at 100%. Okay, let's take a look at our working definition. It's the most you will have to pay. All right, different plans, different things. Some of you have a co-payment that if you're getting ABA for autism, and it might be $10 a visit. All right, now initially you might think, oh, well, this isn't bad, $10 a visit, and now we're getting ABA. But then you realize that you're going to have 2 therapists coming 5 days a week. Oh my goodness, can you feel the shortness of breath that comes on you when you start to do the math on that, right? Okay, but realize that you make that co-payment up to a certain out-of-pocket maximum, at which point when you have paid all of that money, and for different people that amount is different. For you it might be $1,000, or it might be $2,000, or it might be $5,000 that you need to pay, and then once you hit that $5,000 mark in that year, then you no longer have to make those co-payments. I know, keep breathing, right? Because I want you to realize that, yes, while even I heard the $5,000 thing and went, I just feel the muscles in my chest getting tighter. Because who has $5,000 laying around earmarked for that? Not anybody I know in this economy. But when you stop and consider that if your child is getting a 40-hour-a-week program and what that would have cost, and we're saying the maximum that you're going to pay is $5,000, but it might be as high as $130,000 worth of therapy. Then you go, okay, all right, this is a good deal. If we were shopping, this is a good deal. Paying $5,000 for, and it might be $30,000, it might be $60,000, but it could be $130,000. I want to say that the first year that my son had therapy, it was $130,000. And change was about what it was that I did not pay. Now, I will also tell you that I did not have to pay co-payments on all of it. But this is our new reality. So then we start to get creative about if that's your deal and you have to get to that $5,000 mark, how do we do it? And there are some things that we're going to be talking about in just a little while so that you can have some help and support in figuring out that $5,000. Let's talk about if the other thing that some people don't have a co-payment, you just have a deductible that you have to meet the deductible, and that might be $3,000 or $5,000. I can think of one family in particular that they have a $5,000 that I'm aware of. They have a $5,000 co-payment that must, or not a co-payment, a deductible. Let's use the right terms, that they must meet in order, and they have to pay that out of pocket before insurance is going to pay anything on it. There was some stress and concern about how they were going to make that happen. Now, here is some good news that comes with this, is that for this particular plan, and I don't know that this is true for all plans, for that particular plan that I'm talking about, what they discovered was that once they had paid $5,000 out for anything, then their insurance was going to cover 100% of everything else. And as a family, they had not been consistently, maybe they had been spending $3,000 a year and they weren't getting to the point where their insurance kicked in. And so quite frankly, the mom had said to me, we see this as an opportunity. We're going to make our deductible in January, and then we're going to make sure that all the things that we have put off health-wise, we're going to, for the family, not just for the child with autism, for the family, we're going to make sure we do in the rest of the year. It's looking at it as silver lining, right? Figuring it, but you still have to come up with that amount, whatever it is. And how do you do that? I want you to know that there are grants available for that amount, that there's a wonderful organization, Autism Care and Treatment Today, that you can apply for grants to get that amount. There's no guarantee that you will get it or that you will get the whole amount, but you can apply. And I know a lot of families that have been successful in getting that amount. There are other organizations who will lend you the money so that you can make the payment and then slowly pay it back in increments so that your child isn't having to wait while you make payments on that $5,000 or whatever the amount is. There's a wonderful organization called Lend for Health that you can find online. It's Lend, the number 4, Health. We didn't have to make that kind of a payment, but we did have to pay up front for services that we were getting that we then were reimbursed. And so we had to have a revolving $5,000 a month that we did not have. And we were lent the money by a wonderful organization. It's called the Jewish Free Loan Association. And you can find them online as well, the Jewish Free Loan Association. If you're thinking to yourself, well, that's not good for me because I'm not Jewish, I would tell you, neither am I. And they were fabulous and awesome and kind and considerate and lent us the money, and we very happily paid it back to them over time, and we're thrilled to be able to put the money back so that somebody else could borrow the money. They don't care what your religion is at all. In fact, that was what they said to me. We don't care. We're here to help. Gotta love that, right? There are also, there is a, I don't know that it's called a grant, but there is a children's fund that is put out through United Healthcare. You do not have to be a recipient of United Healthcare, but you can apply for a one-time, I believe it is a $5,000 grant that they give, that I've been told, I'm not 100% sure, you'd have to ask them, but I've been told that you could apply it to things like ABA, and so I don't see why you couldn't apply it towards a deductible. So this out-of-pocket maximum, while it is breathtaking in that first moment, it is, and it can seem so overwhelming. $5,000 when your child has autism seems like a mountain far, far away. But I would tell you, and we are going to talk more today about how we can get our heads wrapped around this, because $5,000 is a significantly smaller amount than $100,000. And as much as it doesn't seem like it to you now, it is a much more surmountable amount. I want to encourage you, if you are watching and it feels overwhelming to you, to please write in. Let's talk about what some of your options are. Don't decide, please don't decide we can't afford the $5,000, so we're not going to get the treatment. We had people in yesterday talking about how across a lifetime, how many millions of dollars it costs to take care of a child with autism, and that if we make this investment in our children right now, that we can save exponentially. So this is, I know it's overwhelming, but it's a really good deal, and you do not have to navigate this by yourself. Out-of-pocket maximum, it's important that you know, if you have insurance, what is that number going to be? And it starts new every year. So if you're about to start insurance and you want to start on January 1st and have a plan of how are we going to handle this? How are we going to get over this hump to get into the, in the movie business, they call it golden time, right? When you're getting paid double. Well, when you've stayed so many hours, so you're getting extra money. How can you get into the golden time of autism benefit where you get over your out-of-pocket maximum and it's being paid 100%? And you're sitting there going, we are taking advantage of the best possible treatment that we can get for our child. We are doing the right thing. Let's figure out a way, a plan to get you to the point where you can afford to pay that out-of-pocket maximum and get into that golden time. All right, that is our jargon for the day. Don't be overwhelmed. I'm right here with you. It's hard, but it isn't impossible, right? It is possible, and we're going to get that progress. Okay, we always have a question of the day for you, and our question this week, we're talking a lot about different money things, and I know it's a difficult time, and we're switching gears here from one thing to the other, but I want to hear from you. And I encourage you to answer on Facebook, because not only is it important for you to answer this question, but it's important for other people to see your answer to this question. What was the last thing you bought for yourself just because? It may have been a long time ago. It may have been a long time ago. But it doesn't mean that it's never going to happen again. We had 5 years of ABA in which I stayed at home and I worked as much as I could out of the home, piecing together an income, and it was financially devastating. I don't want to ever make it sound like it wasn't. It was. And we are, still in the process of trying to recover from that, and that will be a lengthy process. And you know what? I have absolutely no shame about that, because we had the highest goal to help our child. I don't think there's any purer goal than that. But it meant that we went without a lot of stuff. And I remember a girlfriend saying a couple of years ago about, I just couldn't decide between these two purses. I just couldn't decide between them, so I bought both of them. And I remembered looking at her like she had 5 heads, and she said, "What?" And I said, "Nothing, that's fabulous. I'm so happy for you." But I went home and I thought, I don't remember what that feels like. To just say, well, I want to buy this thing, and I didn't budget it for a year, and it isn't essential, and in the moment, I'm going to impulse and buy 2 of them. I didn't remember what that felt like. I remember people talking about, well, you just need to take charge of your finance, and it's the latte factor. If you just cut out all the lattes that you're drinking, the amount of money you can save. And I thought, what lattes? Are there people who are going through a drive-thru and getting a latte? Who can afford that, right? So I want you to know, if it's been a while since you've bought something just because, I can relate. I will say to you that is, I'm not in that dire straits anymore. Thank you. But I certainly remember, it is still fresh in my memory of what that was like. And got all kinds of things that we're going to talk about today: survival strategies, things that I did, things that my family did, things that friends of mine have done to make the ends meet when you need to, when you have a higher purpose, when you're going for something bigger. But we can also talk about, how fun it was when you did go and buy something for yourself just because. And the day will come again. It will. So write in and tell us. People need to hear the sacrifices that our families make, to know that they're not alone and that this is a higher calling. Okay, our topic, obviously, for this entire week, we're talking about funding. This is the dirty little, nobody wants to talk about it side of autism, that no one can afford it. It's just a fact of life that no one can afford this. So welcome to that club, and know that we all get it. We all get it. On that long list of things that other people don't get, that we get it. No one can afford this. So we are going to continue to talk about funding today and hopefully come up with some very real solutions for things that are going on for you. It's different for everyone, and the kinds of things that you're facing, different for everyone. But that doesn't change the fact that we have to look at it realistically and have a plan and be willing to ask for help, right? Those are the things we talked about yesterday. So some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, we've got a language tip that coming up for you a little bit later on today. We have our December Smarty. Love Susanna Shinsky. She's a wonderful filmmaker, and she has started making monthly Smarty crafts for us, things that we can do with our kids, and aligning it with different skills that we are teaching our child. I can't wait to see this. I haven't seen December Smarty, so I'm excited about that. And then at the top of the next hour, we're going to be joined by Evelyn Gould. We've decided to name this segment that we do with Evelyn Making Room with Evelyn Gould. She's a BCBA, a board certified behavior analyst, and she talks with us a lot about things that we can be doing to be more efficient, more effective with our kids on the autism spectrum. She's a wealth of knowledge, has worked extensively with kids on the autism spectrum for many, many years. But she also is someone who is very interested in ACT, which is acceptance commitment therapy. You heard Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh talking about it the other day when we had her in for Ask Dr. Doreen. And Evelyn shares with us how it's important that we make room for all the things that we're feeling and all the things that are happening, and don't try to poo-poo or shove anything down, or, my expression that I say sometimes, well, we just have to suck it up, right? And Evelyn reminds me, no, we're going to make room for it. We're not going to suck anything up. We're going to make room for all the things that there are, and realize that, there are some things that are challenging and hard and just plain sucky, thank you, watching my language. But we make room for that and make room for all the other things that are happening too, so that we don't get this one view of something. We get a bigger view of everything. So Evelyn's going to be with us today, and we've asked her to come in and specifically talk about reinforcers, the kinds of things that get our kids motivated to learn and to enjoy what's happening and interact with us. I think it's a great subject to be talking about right around the holidays, and there are a lot of things we can talk about that are reinforcers that are not expensive. We're not talking about going out and spending hundreds of dollars, right? Sometimes it can be something that's a nickel or a quarter, or something you already have around the house that you can repurpose. So we'll be talking about all of that with Evelyn, and of course throughout the day we're going to be talking about this financial journey through autism. We're going to come back with the myth of the day. Can you guess what it is? Stick with us. Currently, in the United States, 1 in 88 children is affected by autism. 1 in 88 means something different when your child is the one. Recovery is possible. Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, host of Autism Live, an online show about autism broadcast by CARD, the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I'm also the mother of a child with autism, my beautiful son, Jem. You know our old joke, guess what?
Chicken butt.
Chicken butt. So we're gonna take the chickens. But things weren't always so easy. I remember when Jem was first diagnosed with autism. I used to lay awake at night in bed and pray for someone or something that could help us to get our child back. My prayers were answered by Dr. Doreen Granpichet and the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD treats autism and other related disorders using the principles of ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, which is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. It is also recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the U.S. Surgeon General. About a year after we started treatment with CARD, we were able to see tremendous improvement, and we got our child back.
What grade are you in?
Second.
You are a smart cookie, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Do you like school?
Yeah.
Do you have any good friends?
Yeah, Oscar.
Oscar is your best friend?
Yeah.
And my child is just one of thousands to benefit from CARD ABA therapy. Across the nation and around the world, children are making amazing progress and being given the keys to unlock their full potential.
We are extremely grateful for the amazing job CARD has done in helping our daughter. Our daughter today, just in 4 months, I think is a totally different child than when she started with CARD. I kind of see it as, it seems like her brain in a way was asleep, and now that we've gotten so many services, we've seen her wake up.
It just has some gases.
Recovery is possible if you take the right steps, if you're willing to put in all the hard work. And 7.5 years, yeah, it's a lot of work. It's worth every little bit, and CARD's been there with us every step of the way.
I have 2 children with autism. I can't imagine a day without CARD or the therapists. They've been so instrumental in helping us with our kids and shaping their lives and helping us help them.
Thank you, Christina Big Alex.
Thank you, Jackie and Mariana.
We've tried other things before ABA, but the most beneficial thing has been ABA services, and I'd be the first person to tell any newly diagnosed family that you have to contact an ABA provider, and if you're lucky enough to have CARD, you're very blessed.
Recovery from autism is absolutely a possibility. We've been recovering children for over 20 years. It's just a matter of identifying the child's medical needs, understanding the child's sensory issues, and then teaching the child all of the skills they need in order to function normally.
We know there's hope for autism. Autism is treatable, and recovery from autism is possible.
Welcome back. It's time for the myth of the day. And of course, we've been talking about funding all week long. We're going to continue to talk about funding. And so there was a myth that I believed and that I hear a lot of people saying or thinking loudly in our direction sometime. And that is that we should be able to take care of our own kids. And by that take care of, it's the one size fits all, that we should make sure that we can take care of them and educate them, that we can make sure that we can take care of them to their behavior, that we should be able to take care of their medical bills, and that we should take care of any therapy and financially foot the bill for all of it. That is something that we should be able to do. Well, that's a myth. And it's a pile of poo. And it's funny because the people that I have heard this from over the years, it's fascinating to me. There was one woman who was saying that she felt that too much of the budget at school was going to help kids who were special needs, that she was upset about the fact that there wasn't enough money for new books at the school and felt that it was because too much money was being spent on the special needs kids in the school. And I said, well, you know, I'm really sorry that that's how you feel, but what is your solution? What would you have us do? And her thing was, well, I take care of my kid. I don't know why you can't take care of your kid, and I shouldn't have to pay extra for your kid. You should take care of your kid. And she was speaking not just to me personally, just, you know, to everybody. And of course, my point was, do you really take care of your kid? Because it would seem to me that your child is in public school. And so you didn't pay for the books that your child has. Why are you insisting that you're paying for your child? Right? It doesn't really make sense. But beyond that, we can't waste a whole lot of time talking to people who are completely ignorant, right? We want to very slowly change as many minds as we can, but we have to start at home. So first thing that we need to acknowledge, because the thought certainly has occurred to me on many occasions, well, I should be able to take care of this. I said this the other day, that, you know, it's always my thing that I needed to be, you know, the one. I should know how to do it. I should, you know, and this is a big myth. So we start today with, can you afford autism, and can anyone afford autism? And the answer to that is that no, you cannot afford autism, and no, no one can. I always like to quote that Holly Robinson Peete said a couple of years ago in a blog, the 8 things that people needed to know about autism. Number 1 is that no one can afford it. If Holly Robinson Peete cannot afford it, then you and I cannot afford it either. And the first people that need to get their heads wrapped around that are you and I. We talked yesterday about forgiveness, that, you know, get your head wrapped around that, and the fact that you get to forgive yourself for that, because, you know, you did not pick this. And if no one can afford it, then that's just one of those hot rocks where you get to go, putting that down. Nothing we can do with that. But we do need to, we talked yesterday about, we need to get ourselves into action. So if we can't afford autism, and if nobody can afford autism, does that mean we throw up our hands and give up and say there's no hope? Absolutely not. There are lots of avenues that we can take if we're willing to take action. The very first thing that you need to do is assess what your insurance situation is now and what it will be relatively soon. It may be that you have access to insurance funding for ABA now, and if you do, then it's still a lot of work. We're not going to say, woohoo, well, it's easy street, right? It means that there's still a lot of work to do. It's just that you know where your work is focused. There's a certain amount of paperwork that you have to do. There's a process that you have to go through. You're going to want to scream and pull your hair out and light your hair on fire. Guarantee it. But a time, if you keep plugging at it, a time will come when therapists will show up at your door and your child will start to make progress. Still a lot of work, but if you know I have insurance, you can focus your energies on doing stuff that makes a difference. Okay. If you put the time and energy into finding out what your insurance situation is and you see, I do not have insurance today, or I am not going to be eligible for insurance for a year, or, you know, there's a question even in a year, but if you don't have it today, let's say that the mandate in your state doesn't take effect for another 3 months, or let's say that you just found out, I know some of you are federal employees that just found out that in your state, we had been reporting earlier this year that they were going to grant behavioral health and ABA for federal employees as of the 1st of this next year, and then some of that power was given back to the states, and some of the states have said no, some of them just haven't responded, and so, so some of you are finding out that you're getting, I don't want to use the phrase I'm thinking, that you're not getting it this year. and that's your reality. And while, as we said earlier, there's a certain amount of suckage there, you got to keep the ball moving, right? And I know you guys have been writing in and saying, okay, what's the next phase? So once you've assessed, and if you say to yourself, I've got insurance, run with that ball. Put your time and energy there. If you look at it and go, I do not have insurance starting in the next 3 months, then it's time to look at some other things. One of the things that I want to encourage you to do is to research in your local funding area, your funding sources. Ask your local support group, what is available here? Are there city sources? Are there county sources? Are there state sources? Be unafraid to ask people, how did you pay for this? I asked so many people, and I continue to ask people, how did you make this work? And I learned so much. Can I tell you that only once, in all of the time that I've been asking people, how were you able to afford this? Only once did somebody say to me, you know what? I had really wealthy in-laws who footed the bill. And I'm so grateful. Every other time, out of probably thousands of people that I have asked, it was from a funding source. Nobody had money tucked away in a bank account in Switzerland or other places. So I want you to know that people have real answers of how they made it work. And then if there are local funding sources, they're not going to come and knock on your door. It would be very unlikely if they came and knocked on your door and said, hey, did you know that you're eligible for this program? I haven't heard that story either. But I do hear about parents saying, you know, I asked somebody and they told me about this thing and I got signed up for it and it took a while, but man, when we got it, it was great. So ask, be unafraid and ask. Another thing that you can do that we talk about all the time, apply for those grants. Apply to ACT Today, Autism Care and Treatment Today. They are not in a grant phase right now, and there's only, is it 3 or 4 times a year that they are in a grant phase? But tomorrow, Nancy Allspot Jackson is going to be here to talk about a new program that they have at ACT Today, an SOS that allows people to apply urgently for grants in between grant periods when there are emergencies. So she'll be here tomorrow talking about that, and you can check out on their website. It's www.act-today.org, and you can find out about that. I mentioned earlier that there is also, there's the ACT Today website, there is a United Healthcare Children's Fund that they give grants one time for up to $5,000. Apply. It cannot hurt you to apply. However, if you know that you already have insurance, get cooking on that first. It's really important for you to set realistic priorities about what you're going to be able to do and what you're not going to be able to do. And I say dream and dream big. You know, I love that thing that says if you're going over after Moby Dick, make sure you pack the tartar sauce, right? There is something about when you sit in front of people who have money to give for services, if you look like you're 100% clear that this is going to happen one way or the other, that I have found that you will have access to more than somebody who sits there and is apologetic or unsure. That is the greatest thing that I took with me into anything that I went to, was the assurity that we were going to make this happen. And I put that mindset on. I would dress for the occasion. Were there parts of me that was not sure? You betcha. But it was like the ultimate acting job. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to be 100% sure. And you ooze that, right? It's happening. This is happening. Are you helping me? I did say to somebody, am I going through you, around you, or over you? What's happening? And they got real clear and real helpful. But be realistic about what you can do, about what's possible for you and what your resources are. For the person who said to me, you know what, you know how we paid for this? I had really wealthy in-laws. That might sound wonderful and glorious, but I'm sure on the day that she and her husband realized that they were going to go and ask for a lot of money, it didn't feel so easy, right? We all have different assets that we can tap into, which brings me to the last thing on this list, which is do not be afraid to raise funds. And I know some people who go, I just can't do that. I can't ask for help. I can't. Well, my thing I would say to you is then you must be doing okay if you can't ask for help. Because for those of us who know how important this is for our child and who don't have any other way, it gets real clear. And by the way, think outside the box. I mean, how can you fundraise? We held a fundraiser where my son, we said, be a part of Jem's Miracle, and we asked a bunch of our friends to perform and had like a dinner that a restaurant sponsored and raised a bunch of money. That made it possible for our child to keep doing what he was doing and to expound on it. It was amazing, and I have never forgotten it. And I thought I was going to feel bad. I thought I was going to feel guilty. And you know what? It lifted us up so much. It was during the holiday season, too. And there were so many people who came up to me, friends and former students, because I used to teach college, and a bunch of them came, a bunch of them performed. And they came up to me afterwards and thanked us for doing this fundraiser. Can you imagine? I wanted to apologize, right? And they thanked us and said, we have not known what to do for you. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to show up for you. Whew. Who would think? Who would think? But stop and consider people in your life, your neighbor, a best friend who lives halfway across the country, and how much you love them and how much you think about them. And maybe you can't do something for them every day, but if something were to happen in their lives and you knew that there was something that you could do to make a difference, you would be thrilled to do it, wouldn't you? Don't take that opportunity away from your friends and family. Be willing to ask for help. And by the way, total strangers. I'm aware of somebody who decided that they were going to make pins. And by the way, I have a pin here, an infinity ribbon pin. And this is because the possibilities are infinite when we have ABA, and I want to remind all of you to sign the petition that's on our Facebook asking Kathleen Sebelius to please make sure that she defines those essential health benefits to say ABA for autism, so that it doesn't become this state-by-state nightmare, that we do level the playing field. But I had a friend who made a different kind of pin, and she put together, it was a little craft thing, and you could glue it together with the pin back, and they were all different, and sold them for $1 and said, it's a thing, it's $1, and it will go towards my child's treatment. And became a business, right? That other organizations would buy the pin things from her to sell and raise money. You'd be amazed at the things that can happen when you let people know that you're doing something that's larger than all the rest of us. And if you want to, we've been telling people to wear these pins, these infinity pins, and you can make them yourself. And we have a video coming up to do that. But you could even make infinity pins and sell them for $1. And say to people, please wear this pin because it says that ABA, the possibilities are infinite, and please pay me $1 for this pin and it will go to my child's ABA fund. Run with it. Run with it. But there are other things that you can do too, but do raise funds. However, don't be afraid to raise funds, I guess is the thing that I want to say. Because this myth that you're going to be able to afford it, it's just that. It's a myth. You can't. You really can't. I can't. Nobody can. Let's lean into each other, hold hands, and sort it out case by case, because our kids are worth it. They really are. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we've got a tip for you, so stick with us.
Hi, I'm Bryce Myler, and I'm the Contracts Director for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I've been here for about 5 years. CARD has several employees with many years of insurance experience, dealing with insurance, dealing with pre-authorizations, dealing with discovering whether there's coverage or not. So we have more experience than any ABA provider that I've ever come across. So for a prospective client, somebody that may be interested in, ABA therapy and what CARD has to offer, we have a special 800 number, and you call that number. They will talk to you about what we have to offer. how ABA works. He'll ask you for the front and back of your ID card, and then we check to see if you do or do not have coverage. If you have coverage for ABA therapy, we try to do whatever we can to set it up where we can bill for you and you don't have to fight with the insurance company every month to get your claims paid. For California residents, we recently did a series of insurance trainings all over the state, and you can click on the link below to watch pretty much the full presentation. It has a lot of information, how you can get your insurance company to comply with what they're supposed to do, understanding the networks, and many other valuable pieces of information.
Welcome back. It is time for our language tip of the week. And we've been promising this for a couple of days, and we just finally got to it today. Language tip of the week. So we had talked a little bit a couple of weeks ago about a social skills tip having to do with gestures and gestures to regulate social interaction. And gestures are a big part of communication. When you stop and think about it, all the different things that we do physically really tell a lot about what we're doing. You know, there was a recent study that they did where they took people who were playing tennis, and they did it two different ways, where they fuzzed out the picture of their face, or they fuzzed out their bodies, and they asked people to say, do you think this is a happy tennis moment or a sad tennis moment? So, you know, there's a picture, and maybe you're just seeing a body with the face fuzzed out, and you had to judge, is this a happy moment or is this a frustrating moment for the tennis player? And then the flip, which is just seeing their face. And what they discovered, because you'd think that the face tells a whole lot, that facial expressions tell a whole lot about what a person is feeling, and we tend to think, you know, eye contact and facial expressions is just where it's all at. But the reality was that for tennis, that overwhelmingly, going just on facial expressions, the participants couldn't tell whether it was a happy or a sad moment, because sometimes facial expressions are misleading. But when they looked at just the body and the face was fuzzed out, the bodies were much clearer. And they were able, with great accuracy, to predict whether they were having a happy tennis moment or a sad tennis moment. And gestures are really important for our kids. We will see with autism that it's part of social communication, it's part of language communication, that our kids sometimes, and it goes expressively and receptively, like so much that we talk about with language, because sometimes we have a child whose ability to read gestures, their receptive ability, when you're doing a gesture or feeling something, they can read it, and they're very adept at doing that, but they don't make gestures themselves. And sometimes it's the flip. They can make gestures, but they can't receive and understand what's happening. This is a gap that we can fill, because we can teach it as a skill. So it maybe the beginning skill is teaching basic gestures, but eventually we want to get to the social skill of gestures to regulate social interaction. That was the lesson that we had talked about before. It's the kind of things when, you know, somebody does this, and that means we want you to be quiet, and to understand a chain of gestures to regulate social interaction. That moment when they're in the classroom, or in an assembly at school, and something's happening, and the teacher will look at them and, you know, give them a look, and then, you know, hold up the finger, and then, you know, like as in shove down, be quiet and move away from the person that you're talking to. And our child needs to be able to understand that chain of gestures to regulate social interaction and be able to do it back. I will be honest with you that my son is much better at receiving than he is at expressively doing gestures. That if I say to him, you know, and move down, he's got it. But he'll make a gesture, and I have no idea what he's saying to me. You know, he'll be like, you know, this across the room, and I'm always sitting there going, what does that mean? Because it's so complicated and not precise and muddy. Ooh, it's just a scary. I keep saying at some point I'm going to take us and do that training that they do with like the military, where they do the, you know, eyes on you too, you know, the whole hand symbol, so that my son and I can communicate effectively. Now, of course, it could always be that my receptive is not as strong as it could be. I hadn't really thought about that. But in any case, where do we start teaching gestures? And we can start with this on a very pure level, taking it one little gesture at a time. But we have a lengthy list of prerequisites before we get to the point where we're teaching gestures to a child. For instance, compliance. Compliance is one of the things that we have to get on board before we can teach anything else. If you stop and think about it, if you don't have compliance, you're not going to be able to sit and teach with the child, right? All those videos when you see the child and they say, you know, put with same, and you go, my kid won't do that. It's probably because compliance isn't there. So compliance, one of the first steps. Eye contact. If we're not making eye contact, it's really going to be hard for the child to notice the gestures and learn them. Following one-step directions is also going to be important, because if I'm going to gesture to do something and I'm going to teach it to the child receptively and expressively, if the child doesn't understand following a one-step direction, we're going to run up against a wall, right? We really want to prompt when necessary, when we're doing this lesson, and really most lessons. It's okay to give our kids the answers. It's okay to physically model it. So if I want to do something, if I want to teach the child to point to something, it's really advantageous for me to do it and then physically prompt them to do it and immediately reinforce it. Don't be afraid to prompt. There is this thing in the world where we think, oh, well, they have to get it on their own. On what planet? They're not going to get it on their own. Most people don't get things on their own. We want to give them the answer, and we can do that through prompting. And we want to set the child up for success by using establishing operations. These EOs that we call them, where we set the stage for the maximum capability for success. So if what I want is to teach the child to point to the cookies that they want, then my EO is that I want to make sure that the child hasn't had cookies right before I do this lesson. You know, if they love cookies, and I want to set this stage to be really successful, and I know that they love chocolate chip cookies, then we're not going to, and we're going to do this at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we're not going to have eaten chocolate chip cookies for snack that day, right? Because I want to supercharge those chocolate chip cookies, and I want to be encouraging them that, you know, when I say to you, which one do you want? And I physically prompt them that they point, I go, yeah, have a cookie, reinforcement, right? So whenever possible, think about, okay, how can I set my child up for success? What circumstances can I manipulate to ensure, or get as close as possible to ensuring that we're going to have success? Okay, here's an early example of gestures, and this is manding, because there's lots of different things that we can do for gestures. We can mand, we can use gestures to request more information. But, you know, manding is one of the earliest things that we can do with gestures, and that's that thing that I was just talking about with the cookies. So our establishing operation, you see on there that it says EO. That's our establishing operation. The child has not recently had access to a highly preferred teddy bear. They love that teddy bear, and we're not teasing them about it. We just, before they woke up that morning, we put the teddy bear someplace where they don't have access to it. We didn't say, oh, I'm taking the teddy bear and I'm putting it in the cabinet. You can't have it. It'd be mean, right? But we put the teddy bear away. Okay, here's our SD, our discriminative stimulus, right? It's what the parent or the teacher does or says to let them know that we're starting something. The parent or teacher places the teddy bear on a high shelf. In sight but out of reach of the child. Now, depending on your child, you may do this in front of them or you may not. Like, we don't want to get into, there are some kids that if you took the teddy bear and put it up on the high shelf, we're going to be in tantrum land right there, right? So it may be that if that's your child, that, you know, while the child was still asleep during nap time, you took the teddy bear and you put it away, because you know that you're going to be working on something at 3:30 in the afternoon. And then the child got up and the teddy bear is just out of sight, out of mind, right? And you're working on other things, and then you take a break, and while the break is happening and the child is doing something, somebody else takes and puts it up on the high shelf, right? Okay, and then, you know, we can be creative about how we have the child notice that the bear is there. But what we want is for the child to gesture and point to the bear, that's their way of asking for it on that high shelf. And as soon as the child gestures and points at the bear, we're going to give them the bear. Right? Any approximation of it. We want to be clear, though, because, children will sometimes vocalize and grunt, and that's fine. That's all to the good because we want them vocalizing, but we want to make sure that the point is happening and we go, yes, good pointing, here's the bear, right? They may not understand what that means in that moment, but if we consistently are reinforcing that, the child will begin to realize that this gets me the thing that I want. And for the period of time that we might be working on this particular exercise, then, we've set this circumstance up, but if we're someplace else and the child starts pointing to something, we want to make sure we reinforce it. So there are times when you're going to put other things you've been working on in the back seat. Maybe that you go through the checkout line and your child has not been pointing, but now the child is pointing at something in the checkout line. And maybe for the week that you're implementing this and wanting to reinforce that, maybe that week, that's the week that you give them the thing in the checkout line and say, good pointing, because that's an appropriate way of asking. You're not going to do that forever. Right? But to establish that, pointing is a good thing and it gets a reinforcement. And then we can go on for other gestures. By the way, this lesson and more than 6,000 lessons are available in the skills program, and it gives you a list of exemplars for gestures like pointing and everything else that you can possibly imagine, so you don't have to sit and think it up. It'll give you a list and say, here are some suggestions. You can add to it too, though, if there's something that's on there that or isn't on there, that you would like to add to it. You can customize it for yourself, and it gives you great teaching points and tells you how to expand on this lesson to work on many, many more things. Really important that we teach our children to gesture. It will help them. And again, I want to remind you, teaching it receptively and expressively, so that at some point we would do this lesson where we would point and third person would help the child to give us the thing that we were pointing to. So really important lessons, gestures. Again, you can find it in the skills program. And by the way, this is a great time of year. If you haven't already looked at skills, I want to encourage you, you can do a trial. There's two different types of trial memberships that you can sign up for. One that requires that you put a credit card down, and it gives you 14 days free with the credit card. But then if you don't want it, you have to remember to cancel the subscription. And there is another one if you don't want to do that. I know a lot of people are like, I don't want to give my credit card, I want to see it, and I don't want to have to remember in 14 days. I understand that. And so there's another version that you can get where you don't have access to the full skills, but that you can see a wide variety of things that are available in skills that are so beneficial. I use skills at home. I love it. So check out gestures in the skills program. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and look at your answers to the question of the day, both yesterday and today. So stick with us.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. Say it louder. L. L. N. O. O. P. Q. R. S. S. No. No. T. Ha ha ha. Okay, fine. We'll sing later. He's like a sponge right now. Anything we say, he just wants to repeat everything. Even during other programs, he'll just repeat the same instruction. We've been really working on eye contact in a structured setting, giving him the instruction, look at me. He's required to look at us, but that's been a little difficult because he's confusing the eye contact with verbal imitation, so he'll just say, look at me, instead of actually looking at you. So during play, I'll call his name or say, look at me, and he's doing really good. I don't have to prompt him too many times. He actually just spontaneously will look on his own, which is a lot better today.
Help. Help.
Help? What do you need help with? What do you need help with?
Let's see that again. Eye contact.
What do you need help with?
Look.
Huh? Show me. What do you want? What do you want?
Box.
Box? Okay.
Okay.
Say, I want box.
Box.
Say, I want.
Box.
Yeah, say, I want box.
Yeah, box.
Good. Here you go.
Here you go.
So we have a couple new programs that I'll show you. We have receptive commands. So that's just when we give him an instruction vocally, and he has to be able to perform that instruction just by being able to identify and comprehend receptively what it means. And a lot of the actions that we're going to be doing, they're gross motor actions, and they're the same actions you've been doing in NVI, so non-vocal imitation. So they'll be look very familiar, but it's just we're doing it receptively now instead of expressively. Do this. Good job. Ready? Do this. Yay! Very good. Stand up. That's good. Nice job. There's one sticker. Okay, ready? Clap hands. Oh, almost, but try again, okay? Try again. Ready? Clap hands. Oh, almost, kiddo. We're going to try again, okay? This is clap hands. Can you do it? Do this. That. Yeah. Okay, ready? Clap hands. Like this. Yeah. Clap hands. Yeah. Okay, you try. Clap hands. Yeah, that's clap hands. Okay, ready? Clap hands. Yeah, there you go. Okay, one more sticker. Stand up. That's right. You got all your stickers. Good job. Okay. Wait. Thank you. So that's another thing. Wait. Another thing we're working on is having him wait for things. And we're starting off with just 2 seconds. Just things like waiting for tangible items, like things that he really wants, or waiting before we go somewhere, or waiting before we open the door or something. Just so he learns that when we say wait, he just has to stand there and wait for whatever amount of time. But as he gets better and better, we're going to increase the increments of, increase the duration of the time he has to wait.
He went swimming yesterday for the first time in a while.
How did that go?
Went okay.
Yeah.
He was excited. He loved being in the water, but
Last
he was
summer
a little cautious.
we went in several times, and then we got diagnosed in the winter or fall, but he hasn't been in since he got diagnosed.
Okay. And did you do okay?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't here, and she was with him. But,
oh, that's great.
And Papa was with
No?
us.
There too.
Yeah.
No. Down. Up. Up. Down. Up. Down. Up. Down. Should we draw? What's this?
Cat. Well, Mom didn't even finish. You already knew what it was.
Cat. What's the cat say?
Meow.
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 What else do you want to draw? What's this?
Meow. Cloud.
Cloud. What if I do this to it?
Clouds.
Now what is it?
Tree.
Tree. Are we all done with that tree? What's this? Two.
Hey, buddy. Are you kind of a narcissist?
I think he's trying to figure out.
How can I see me?
How can I? He's so funny. He'll do that.
How can I get a better look at me?
Yeah.
He's going to climb on your lap, Miss Suzanne. I hope you don't mind.
There are some days when I'm invisible and just a fixture in the room. Today is not one of them. The past few sessions, Jack Riley will for a moment notice me and become fascinated with the camera. He's been interested in looking through the viewfinder and figuring out the difference of what he sees in front of him and what the frame is showing him. It's like he's trying to figure out what kind of reflection is being shown to him. The way in which he looks at himself and others in the camera, to me, relates to eye contact. It seems easier through that buffer.
Never interrupt a man in his crush.
He was flirting with the girls that were heading to the pool yesterday.
I guess there were some bikini girls over here he was flirting with.
He went right up to the window and like looked right at her. Set himself up.
Yeah, he did. I didn't see it, but I had it described well to me.
Then the other girl came down to get her, and he did one of these. He watched her walk by, and I'm like, okay.
Well, remember what he did to the waitress at Bodega?
It was all over her.
Yeah, he once, we went to this restaurant, and our waitress came up, and this was, I don't know, 10 months ago?
Yeah.
8 or 10 months ago, and she sauntered off, with her, and he goes like this in his stroller. He goes like this. Like the college kid, watching her walk away. Right, Jack? Then he said, Dad, check it out. No, I'm just kidding. That was too much. Did I go too far?
The fact that I was taking his pants off. that might have been it.
Dad.
Hey, Stinky, now you're climbing on her with a diaper.
That's not good. She didn't buy in for that.
I took your game, didn't I?
Yeah, I don't have any game now. No game, Dad. No game, Mom.
Pretty hard to be cool with the diaper on. Okay, sillies. Come here.
Hey.
1, 2, 3!
She's still filming. You can still watch. See?
Want to see?
There's some stuff you might not want to see, but...
Here, let's get the cracker off your chin.
No kicking. No kicking.
Don't kick your sister.
Don't kick your sister. Yeah. I was going to say, Mom? Really? Okay.
Well, that's what I was telling him in the pool yesterday. Don't kick your little sister. And I'm like, well, that's the first time of many that I'll tell him that. Before you go back to flirting.
Rule number 1.
Yes, definitely pants back on. No kicking. Hey, squirrel! Squirrel! Ow! Squirrel! Squirrel! Peppa Pig. Daddy Pig. Mommy Pig. Baby Pig. Baby Pig. Peppa Pig. Baby.
Welcome back. That was the A Word you just saw, and we want to encourage you to watch the entire series from beginning to end, which you can do on their very own YouTube channel. It's really a wonderful opportunity, to fall in love with children, but also to see the arc of ABA and what can happen for our kids, all the possibilities. We are so thrilled because we're joined right now by Evelyn Gould. She's a BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst, and we're starting to call this segment Making Room with Evelyn Gould. Yes, because so much of what we talk about here, you encourage us to make room for our feelings and for the things that are actually happening, but leaving room for the fact that there's more than what we're just experiencing this millisecond of time. And I always appreciate when you come in because you always lift us up. I always feel better. And there's some, I know that it reads because you guys have written in and said how much you enjoy having Evelyn here on the show, but there is something about you. You have a soothing factor to you. It's very medicinal. It's a very good thing. But I asked you to come in today and talk a little bit about about reinforcers, because we kind of went back over the basics yesterday of ABA and how important it is that what I call rule number one, that in order for anything to happen over and over and over again, it's got to be reinforcing. That's a big concept to get your head around, and to go back and look at everything you do and everything that happens in life, and to realize, oh, there's a paycheck in that somewhere.
And every single thing that you do, there's a paycheck, or you wouldn't do it.
And I will be very honest with you that had not occurred to me at any point in my life before my child was having intensive ABA. I was not raised with that.
Most of it, I mean, I don't have a child with autism, but I obviously studied and came into that world, and I didn't realize it till I was studying it, and then suddenly the lights started going on, and I was like, oh, this is actually going on all the time with everything and across my life. And then I started, being the person that I am, I start analyzing everything.
Yes.
And trying to look at all the problems that I'm experiencing from that point of view, not just how can I get this kid to do what I want them to do.
Yeah. Well, it is kind of, I love that it's that light bulb moment, and then it becomes like a new toy. Like, how can I look at things through this new toy and see them in a different light? And it's a very powerful toy once you start to see, oh my goodness, that's why I do this. And then I think you get to a point, certainly I did, where it was like, okay, how is this going to be useful to me? And I continue every day to look at it, and I don't completely get it all the time, because sometimes what is actually reinforcing is elusive.
Yeah, and I think, I want to add to the, wow, I have this new tool thing, just to say how hopeful it is too. And that was a light bulb moment for me, because once you start thinking of behavior as people only do things because there's a payoff, then you realize, well, then there's a potential to change everything.
Yes.
Because it's not like things are just happening and spontaneously for no reason.
Right.
Or happening in a vacuum in any way. Like, everything's kind of rule governed, so to speak, and everything's happening for a reason. So that means that you can potentially change what's happening by manipulating those things.
Yeah, because otherwise you're in this state of chaos where anything could happen at any moment, and there's no rhyme or reason to it, and you can't change it.
Or you're saying, like, your child is doing that because he has autism, which is isn't very hopeful, because what can you do about that?
Right.
It's just, if you're explaining something by that label, then you're very limited as to what you can do about it. But if you're saying, oh, he's throwing his toys because he doesn't want to follow the instruction I just gave him, then there's more potential to change that behavior.
Yeah, it really is a shift in the way you look at things. And I know certainly Jem was having ABA for quite a while before, and I was still saying things because somebody would say, well, he's doing this and that, and I'd go, yes, he has autism, and that was the end of the sentence for me. I was like, this is not shocking to us because the child has autism. What I didn't realize was that there was a whole other conversation to be had after that. That had the potential to change things for him in a really positive way.
So the question would be like, yes, he does. He's doing that because he has autism. So my question would be, well, what does that mean?
Right.
So what do you mean by he has autism? How does that look?
Yeah.
Like, what are the types of things? What makes it up his autism? And you might say things like, well, he doesn't communicate well. He doesn't know how to communicate. He has a really hard time with change.
Yeah.
And he needs things to be a certain way. La la la. So you start like thinking about behavior.
Right.
And then once you start pulling out those skill deficits or things he can't do that you want that say a kid without autism can do, or things that he's doing too much of, or things that he's doing that are inappropriate, then you have the potential to change that, because you say, oh, he can't communicate, he doesn't have the language skills, so we think, well, that's something we can change. We can work on that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. The example that I can think of is that early on, at his first IEP, before he was actually starting at school, and they had done the whole assessment of him, and they said, well, he struggles with and isn't able to effectively transition from one thing to the other. And of course, my thing was,
he has autism.
Yeah, he has autism. Let me draw you a picture. And I really was a little irritated with them about it. And then what I came to see was that meant that we were going to change some things to help him to be able to grow and learn how to transition effectively.
Yes. And so the autism, I guess saying my child has autism is helpful in the sense that you then it helps the person understand, well, then he maybe isn't going to learn the same way, or
Right.
he hasn't learned the same way as a typically developing child has. He's responded to his environment in a different way.
Right.
So we know that. So then we can approach it in a different way from we would with, say, another child who has some other difficulty, or a typically developing child. So in that way it's helpful, because it immediately says to me, okay, so this child is likely to have difficulties with this and this, and they're not going to learn the same way. I can't expect him to pick something up as quickly, or maybe we're going to have to work harder at finding reinforcers, or so on. So that's helpful, but as an explanation, it's not helpful, because it means you're cornered into a situation where you can't change anything.
Yeah. Hands up. Nothing we can do about it. We don't want that, because we want to be mindful of how we're taking action, because we always want to be efficient and effective. So, and we talked a little bit yesterday about this 3-term contingent, about the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. And sometimes you guys will come in and talk about antecedent modification, and sometimes you come in and talk about consequence modification. But no matter what you're doing, we always want to make sure that we're reinforcing the behaviors we want.
Yes.
And that we're not reinforcing behaviors we don't want. And we talk a lot about challenging behavior and not reinforcing that behavior, but I think for parents, one of the hardest things to get our head around is how to reinforce the behaviors we want.
Yeah, and going back to what you said earlier about sometimes it's really confusing figuring out what is actually, or it's hard to see what is reinforcing the behavior or maintaining the behavior. And that's because I think culturally we have, we're obsessed with this idea of reinforcement meaning reward, which means positive stuff. And to be even more confusing, we often talk about positive reinforcement, which is also just adds a whole other layer, where it's very easy to then think that positive reinforcement or reinforcement means the child's getting something they like. And so sometimes you can be looking at a behavior, and so your child throws all their toys and you're screaming, your husband comes in and he screams at your child, and he just keeps doing it, and you're like, I don't understand, because my husband's yelling at him, and I just don't understand what's good about that. Why does he keep doing it? And the behavioral analyst comes in and says, oh, well, he's getting attention from your husband. That's reinforcing the behavior. But that goes completely against our idea of reward and positive, like reinforcement being something positive that's happening.
And in your underslept state, where you're overwhelmed anyway, I can tell you there have been many times where something was happening in the moment, and my husband and I had a reaction, and somebody said, you just reinforced it, and we went, shoot me, I don't get it.
And also, what you think you're doing, or your intention, doesn't necessarily have the effect that you think it is. So you can be in your mind thinking, I'm going to punish this behavior. I'm going to yell at this person because they did the wrong thing, and that's going to stop them doing it. And so in your mind you think that you're providing a punisher. So it's very confusing whenever someone comes in and says you're reinforcing that behavior. And I see that in my daily life when I'm dealing with people and I'm trying to change their behavior. And so my natural reaction to something that they do, this behavior that I want to change, isn't necessarily what I should be doing. Because it's actually, even though I think it should be changing the behavior, and I think it's a punisher or whatever, I think it's going to decrease the behavior. In fact, it's actually probably reinforcing it. But it's very hard to change what you're doing, so I really sympathize with that.
It's really, I mean, it is like a math equation where you're trying to decide what the variables are and see it clearly, and it's hard on a daily basis. I don't think you ever get to the point where it's just like easy.
No, and
but
so
it gets easier.
What we have to do in order to decide what is actually reinforcing the behavior, that's about data and taking the emotion out of it, and taking
it's the dirty word.
It's the dirty word. But it's trying to take the emotion out and your opinion out of it, and actually, what I think that I am yelling at this person and they shouldn't be doing what they're doing, and they should know better, and they're obviously upset, they don't want to be doing this behavior, and so therefore I can't possibly be reinforcing behavior. But if I actually take a step back and go, is the person continuing to do this? Yes. How long have they been doing it? 2 weeks. Have I seen any change? No. What does that tell you? It tells you that I'm not being effective, and I'm probably actually making it worse, or at least maintaining the behavior. So you have to try and take a step back and look at what's happening with the behavior. Like, is it going away? Is it increasing? Is it staying the same? And that will tell you whether your consequences that you're providing are reinforcing the behavior or not.
Yeah. I'm laughing because you just put a bunch of things together that are all the things that are they're my short suit, right? Not my good suit. But, removing the emotion from it, being very analytical about it, and taking data on it. Like 3 things that, are not necessarily, so maybe that's part of the reason why I struggle with it. But I think we should take a break and then come back and use some really clear examples of reinforcement and some clues about knowing when it's reinforcing behaviors we want to see more of. Let's start with that. And if you guys have questions, now is a great time for you to write in on the live forum. So stick with us.
My name is Rocky. Autism used to affect 1 in every 10,000 children. Now it affects 1 in every 91 kids.
TACA is one of 5 organizations helping families living with autism today.
Our kids came back to life. There's a whole community out there, and now we're a part of it.
Oh, TACA has a place for me.
To find TACA, go to www.tacanow.org.
Please.
Welcome back. Our special guest right now is Evelyn Gould. She's a BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst with extensive experience working with children on the autism spectrum. And she's also very good at dealing with the parents. I just have to say, and that's at least half the equation, right? Sometimes it's 3/4 of the equation, or 2/3. In any case, we were talking about reinforcement and how this can be something that's really difficult to understand. But I want to focus on, we want to reinforce behaviors we want to see more of. And so if a child is doing something and it's the right something, what kinds of things can we do to reinforce that behavior?
Well, I think the first step is to notice it.
Yes.
So your first step is to actually start looking for the things that you want, and maybe even steps towards what you want. So noticing is a really big, I mean, it sounds really logical and maybe a bit stupid, like, of course, but you'd be surprised how much we don't notice people being good or people doing things that we want. We notice immediately they do something we don't want. We hone right in. It's like we're built that way. I think as human beings, we're just built to notice the things we don't want, and we kind of ignore or just forget about the stuff we want. So that's really, it's like training yourself to catch them being good, we say, and like training yourself to notice the good things and to focus in on those. And trying to find opportunities as well, like seeking out opportunities to provide reinforcement. That's the key.
So noticing first, the example that I always remember you saying is that when you're having a child over for a play date and the children are playing together really well, that our tendency in that moment is to go, oh, thank goodness, I can go have a minute to myself. I can go start laundry or load the dishwasher. They're playing great together, lovely, and we retreat. And that while that instinct is there, we don't want to invalidate it, the truth is that's the moment when we need to be reinforcing.
I mean, if you think about the amount of couples who just forget that they're doing nice things for each other, and then the minute your partner does something to annoy you, you're like right on it straight away, and then that just becomes all you see of that person. And I think it's the same with our kids. If you have kids who have a lot of difficulties, that you can get so lost in the difficulties and focusing on those things that you might even feel like there is nothing to reinforce. Like I definitely have worked with parents who, when I talk to them about this, they just are so distraught and so focused in on the hard things that they're just like, there isn't anything for me to reinforce. He's not doing anything.
We certainly hear that, and people have written in before and said it would be great, but there's nothing to catch. Doing good, everything is bad. And that, that's what it feels like sometimes. I think it's important to acknowledge that's what it feels like. But if I love the experiment that they do sometimes in conferences where they say, all right, everybody look around the room and I want you to see all the green things in the room. Look for them. We're taking 60 seconds. Everybody look, close your eyes, picture all the green things in the room. Now, with your eyes closed, tell us all the blue things in the room. And you literally feel like your brain is being ripped out of the back of your head and you can't think of a single blue thing. But when you open your eyes and look around the room, it's like a sea of blue. It's important that we look for the right things.
We notice, we're just practicing noticing, and also So yes, you definitely want to do that. You want to try and notice, and they can be the tiniest things. You know, it's like changing your idea of what good is, what something good is, and if it's just like a split second where your child is not engaging in some problem behavior, or you know, you have a fleeting moment of your child looking you in the eye, or whatever those little things are, you will find them, because nobody is engaging in problem behavior all the time. It's just not possible. So it's looking for those moments and then learning how to prompt those moments, so increasing the opportunities. So like helping your child do something. So rather than waiting for your child to I'm trying to think of an example. Like, so rather than waiting for your child to hand you something, and so you can be like, yay, that you just lightly prompt them to do it, and then you can reinforce that behavior. So it's creating opportunities as well as noticing.
And I think, you know, this is one of those things that we need to remind ourselves daily, because you know, I have had the benefit of a year of you coming in and talking on a weekly basis, and I know these things, and I know the difference in my life when these things happen. And I can still think of a day a couple of months ago where I'm still on my child about crossing the street. Man, I just like, you know, because I worry about it as a parent. That I would say that his safety rate is probably at 90% crossing the street. That 10% just keeps me awake at night, you know? And we were coming, there's a pool in our neighborhood where it's our association pool, and it's, you know, it's really close to our house, and we were walking back from the pool, and I was talking to my son, and we were da-da-da-da about something, and he looked both ways before we crossed the street. And I, you know, in the middle of the street, I stopped and I said, from the thing that I was talking about, I said, you know what, I just got to stop for a second. That was really great what you just did. And then he stopped and he said, I wish you did that more. And I said, what? And he said, you don't tell me enough when I'm doing something right. Now, this is the child that I said, please, you know, can we work hard so that my child can speak to me? Like, how have I not learned this lesson? But I think it's one of those things that I have to be reminded on a daily basis.
You have to work on it constantly, and we're all like that. Like, we're all... I know all this stuff, and I have to constantly remind myself to notice things, and like in relationships or work with work colleagues, like to really be mindful of looking for the good. And I definitely notice a quality of life going up when I start focusing on the positive things and telling people the things that I'm happy about, even if it's the tiniest thing. I mean, I definitely practice. I like to practice even with objects. It sounds so stupid, but the mindfulness idea of just, you know, the other day I had a punnet of strawberries and I was washing them in the sink, and I really focused in on the strawberries and was like, wow, the color is so amazing. This is really, look how beautiful this color is. And it just gave me such, it really does sound ridiculous when I'm talking about it, but it's that idea of stuff that you just don't normally pay any attention to. And then if you try and look at things from a new, like as if you've never seen that thing before, like from that new point of view, and then you start to notice all these wonderful things that you're just bypassing because you're so focused on dealing with all the stuff on a daily basis that you're dealing with.
Absolutely. We have a tradition in our family that when we see a tree that's really colorful for fall, we give it applause. We've done that ever since Jem was little. And now he's like, Mom, it's not cool anymore. But, you know, we've been applauding trees this last week because they're just particularly colorful. And otherwise you walk by and maybe don't have an appreciation for it's breathtaking. Absolutely beautiful. So I love that. Being mindful, not just with our kids, but of all the things that we have that are happening that are positive. It's that thing that you always talk about, you know, you can look through that little tiny lens and see all the negative stuff, but if you could make room and pull back, you could see that there's a lot.
And it doesn't make those things go away, but it just means that they're not only that thing. Like that's not all there is. There's other possibilities. And we really don't realize how many possibilities there are in any moment, I think, because we're so focused in on what's going on right now.
Yeah, we're having our experience of things, and it seems like it's the be-all, end-all. Okay, so with
respect, so I'm just bringing it back to the reinforcer. Yes. So with respect to the reinforcement issue, you know, I think it can be really hard to identify what's going on because you're focused in on what you're doing and what you're trying to do with your kid and your kid's behavior. And also, you forget that there's a reciprocity there. There's like a back and forth thing. You're not operating in a vacuum any more than your child is. So chances are your child is very good at getting the results that they want. It's working for them, like we said, it's working for them. And so they're reinforcing your behavior, which can also make it really hard then to realize what's going on, because your behavior is being reinforced.
Yeah.
So it feels like it's working, or it feels like that's what you're supposed to do. Like that's like the natural cycle of things. You're both reinforcing each other's behavior.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why it's really hard.
But sometimes you're on a treadmill to nowhere.
Yes, basically. And so, but you only would know that if you're looking at the data and you're able to step back and notice the bigger picture rather than what's happening in that moment.
So making friends with the data.
It's very hard to do, but it doesn't have to be complicated. It can just be very simple.
Right. But give us an example of a moment in which taking the data could help us, and how we would reinforce a behavior. I know it's like open-ended.
Yeah, so if you're teaching, because teaching is different, teaching is likely to be quite different from what it would look like if you're trying to replace a problem behavior.
Okay.
And generally, like when we're teaching skills, we are kind of replacing inappropriate skills. That's why we're teaching our kids these skills. So say we are trying to teach, I don't know, teach a play skill or something.
Okay. Like taking turns.
Yeah, like taking turns. So you're going to want to track when your child does what it is you're trying to do, and when they don't, so that you can tell, because we tend to use our initiative. You know, if we use our initiative and we say, "Oh, I think he's getting it," or "I don't think he's getting it," and usually those are not correct. We just are very bad at actually using our intuition or using our judgment just to tell how well things are going.
It's inaccurate.
Yes, it's generally inaccurate, but you need to see it on the page. And I mean, I had this experience recently. I was trying to actually change some employee behavior, and when I was
myself included,
and I was just like, I was looking at, even before I'd plotted it on a graph, so I did even have some data, and I was just looking at the numbers. I had like 20 different numbers in front of me, and I was like, oh, this looks terrible. There's like no change, nothing's happening. But when I actually went and plotted it on a graph, I was like, oh, this is working.
How about that?
It was really clear to me that it was working. But if I'd gone using my own judgment, I would have just been like, it doesn't work. Because it felt like it wasn't working.
Interesting. And I think it's important for people to know, too, that when we talk about ABA and we talk about this reinforcement, we're not just talking about our kids.
No.
And that it is something that can be used, and that sometimes you guys will try to change behavior of what we're doing here to see what's effective and what not. And so we were all sort of taking part in that. And it's been very interesting for me to take part in that, just changing a behavior that I was doing.
And another thing about taking data is that you will be surprised how reinforcing taking data is. Well, you might disagree with me, Shannon, but it feels very laborious. Sometimes it does feel very laborious and annoying, but when you start to look at a graph and you see on paper that something's going up, but a skill is increasing, and you can see it in front of you, or you see a behavior decreasing and you can see it, it can give you that motivation to keep doing what you're doing and not give up.
Right.
Like the other day when I was like, this is not working, and then I saw the graph and was like, oh, it is, and it gave me that motivation to continue.
So, but let's talk about the reinforcement part of it, though, because we keep talking about, how important it is to notice these things. But because the thing that's weird to me always is that I always think that reinforcement is like the recession. You know how they say, how they'll say, well, we think we're in a recession, but we don't know if we're in a recession. We can't know until after it's over, and then we can look at the data and know whether it truly was a recession. So you never
know, right? You don't know if reinforcement has occurred until afterwards, and you see whether the behavior increases or maintains.
Right.
But there are definitely things you can do to make it more likely that that's going to happen, and I don't know if that's where you're going with this, but we can certainly make choices or put in place, try a few things or do things that will make it more likely that what you're doing is going to reinforce the behavior.
Right.
So things like preference assessments, so figuring out what motivates a person, and that's very individual, so you need to get to know that person or the child, try stuff out with them. That's usually the best way. You can do some formal types of assessments, but if you don't want to go down, if you not have time, you're not able to learn how to do a formal preference assessment, then just putting a few things out in front of your child and seeing what they choose and what they gravitate towards, and then, or just trying some things out with them while you're playing, or seeing what happens.
Yeah, but I want to bring home the point, because this was really hard for my husband and I, still is, that if you try something, and you should be willing to try something, and it doesn't change the behavior, it doesn't mean that ABA doesn't work. It means you got to try another reinforcer.
Right.
That sometimes it's not reinforcing enough.
Yeah, because that would be like me saying, okay, I like chocolate cake, Shannon, and just say you hate chocolate cake. And then
I can't eat chocolate cake. I'm allergic to it. So
I love chocolate cake, and you do something I like, and I go, Shannon, I love that. I love that BCBA. Here's some chocolate cake.
Right.
And then I expect that to reinforce your behavior, and you're like, eh. And then I'm like, oh, that ABA doesn't work.
Right.
But what didn't work was that this wasn't working as a reinforcer, and that's if you present something and you don't see any behavior change, then it's not a reinforcer.
Right.
And you just haven't figured out what to use.
Right, and therein lies the rub, because I think a lot of people, when you see ABA work with a child and you see it work in one instance and you go, oh, look at that, I didn't know my kid could do that, and it's so exciting, and you go, they did it for that other person, why aren't they doing it for me? And you get a little bit more buy-in, you go, I want to do this too. And then you try it with something and you don't get the reinforcement of it worked and I saw a change in the behavior. I think a lot of parents get put off and go, well, it's not working.
Yeah.
And what I hear from you guys all the time is, no, one of the variables isn't working.
Yes, exactly. Like something, the child is always behaving how they should be, kind of, for what's going on. And it's the same as like any person, and we all behave how we should for given our environment and what's going on. So you've got to remember that. So it's not that ABA is not working, or it works in this circumstance but not in this circumstance. It's that you haven't manipulated you haven't had control over what's maintaining that behavior, or you don't have control over the triggers or whatever is going on in the environment. So you just got to remember that, like, whatever your kid does, they've done what they're supposed to do given whatever's going on. And so you got to figure that out, and then you know what to change.
Right. And it's a little bit like being Sherlock. You got to figure out, follow the clues and figure out.
And with practice, you get better at it. You know, we have a lot of experience or training that enables us to maybe get to the result, or be Sherlock Holmes a lot easier and quicker and faster than if you're a parent and this is all new to you.
But I also think too that you guys have the confidence that you know that you will find something that works because you've seen it,
absolutely,
and you've experienced it and you've done it. And I think that that's a little bit of a hump that as parents we have to get over, to have the confidence that I am doing the right thing. I just have to manipulate a couple of other things, and this is going to work.
And you'd be surprised that you might be surprised to know that usually when people are new to a child, like a therapist or myself, I feel a bit like, because I don't know the child very well, and I don't know what to try, and I will try a bunch of stuff that the kid is just like, what is that? I don't like it, and I make mistakes because I'm trying to figure out what motivates that particular child. So we're all kind of in that boat a little bit, but we don't have the same emotional things, and we're not telling ourselves the same stories that you're probably telling yourself. And you're probably likely, if you're a parent, to have a lot of anxiety about, is this going to work? Am I going to make things worse? Am I going to do it wrong? Like, I was just working with a parent this week who is amazing and does everything we ask her to do, and she's just amazing, and yet she always has this anxiety of, I don't know, I don't think I know what I'm doing, and I'm not going to do it right, and I'm going to mess it up, and she still has that, even though she always does. She's just amazing.
Wow.
So I don't know where I was going with that, I guess.
But I think it's good for us to know that you guys also have that period of time of finding your footing, but you can emotionally be in a different place. I think that's important for us to realize. I think we should take another break, and then let's come back and talk about some interesting, we had a list of reinforcers that you gave us that we put on Facebook that we'll post it a little bit higher up again, so that you guys can see it, but how simple it can be, the things that are reinforcing to a small child.
Most effective too.
And really inexpensive things. So we'll take a break and we'll come back and talk about those very real examples of some things you might want to try. Stick with us.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism. Doreen Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is a visionary in the field of autism, and now you get to ask her questions every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on Ask Dr. Doreen. Welcome back. I want to remind everyone that tomorrow is Ask Dr. Doreen Day, and so starting at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. I always want to say Central Time. We're in Pacific Time here. 10 a.m. Pacific Time, we will have Dr. Doreen Granpeche here, and she will answer your questions live on the air. It's a wonderful opportunity. You guys can start writing in your questions now. I usually take the first 2 questions from people either previous weeks or people who have written in during the night, and then we try to take live ones as much as possible. So if you feel like you didn't get your question answered, ask it again or ask a question right now. It ups the likelihood that it will get answered. But right now, we are here with Evelyn Gould. She's a BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst with a great deal of experience working with children on the autism spectrum. A wonderful, wonderful resource, and we've been talking about reinforcers. And I said, let's talk about some specific things, and you were saying during the break, but really it's key to just be willing to try stuff.
I guess I was saying to Shannon, but we want to get away from this idea about what reinforcers are, or like specific things are reinforcers. Like the whole point is the world is your oyster when it comes to reinforcers. Like anything could potentially be a reinforcer. You just don't know until you try it. So like even like, you know, a particular kind of a pen might be really, like I'm looking at that pen over there and thinking, oh, I remember I used to have one of those.
This one has a highlighter on the back, very
so
reinforcing.
That's like, oh yeah, I want to use that.
It's green though, so our audience can't see it.
You can, it is a case of, I mean, I know often the really simple things are the things that work best as well. So I know kids that, you know, love like spinning tops or like even like blowing up a balloon and letting it fly around the room, or they love to collect like paper clips. I can see some sitting over there, or pennies, or like love having their arms wiggled, or any kind of like all physical. We've got to start thinking, like it's about thinking creatively. I think actually that's the hard part.
Yes, I do.
It's actually really hard. And some therapists I work with are amazing at thinking creatively, and they don't get the performance hang up of like, what if he doesn't like it? Which we all get, and they just try everything, and they find like the most amazing random things turn into reinforcers, or like get the child's attention and like really get them like wanting to work and wanting to do whatever it is you want them to do.
And if you stop and think about it, I think most of us have somewhere in our head, maybe you don't even have it formatted like a list, but you have a list of things that you do when you meet people, or we love babies in my family, and so we have a list of things that we do to try to get a baby to laugh. And maybe it's not a hard and firm list, but I can remember my son saying to me a couple of years ago, how do you do that? How do you get a baby to laugh? We'll be standing in line at the grocery store, and I kind of thought about it. I was like, well, I always start with fish lips, and if fish lips doesn't get them, then I'm going to go on to the next thing. You know, and there's always the making that face that some kids just think is hilarious. You know, and so Jem was really interested. He was like, well, you know, you always start with fish lips. Yeah, I always start with fish lips because, you know, 80% of them, you know what I mean by fish lips, when you go, you know, babies love this. It kills, right? So, and in that respect, you know, with my own child, though, fish lips never worked. Never worked. And so much of the stuff that I did with my own child didn't work. And I will be honest that there was a period of time when I didn't go and get a new bag of tricks. But I do have a bag of tricks with him now, that if he is having a moment and I, you know, want to get him out of something or get his attention, or, you know, that he finds reinforcing, that I can go to. And maybe it's about, you know, listing a bunch of different things so people have a bag of tricks to start with, but to realize it's just a bag of tricks.
And remembering that, honestly, reinforcers can be anything and any type of thing, and just observing people and seeing what they gravitate towards. And then I you know, even thinking, if you think about yourself, like, you know, you get those questions that ask you what your favorite things are, what makes you happy, and then you start, at first you're like, money, you know, the sunshine, like really obvious things, and then you start to delve deeper and you're like, oh, the smell of a feel of a clean sheet, and the smell of like bread, or just these more these other smaller things,
specific
things that don't necessarily cost a lot of money, or I don't know, you just got to start thinking that way with your kids.
Absolutely.
And kids are really naive to the world, and so they don't need, like, you don't have to go out and buy crazy video games or crazy expensive toys. Like, usually, quite often, the things like just the element of surprise for children, some kids really hate that, so you just have to try it and see, because some kids will be really frightened and they really don't like it, but a lot of kids love surprise, and you can do something surprising with pretty much anything. and that will work.
Honestly, you just made me think of it. I haven't done this with Jem, but with my sister's kids when they were little, a roll of Scotch tape, they could have the most fun because you could shape it into different things, but we would also do a thing where we would make funny faces and put tape on our faces to be, so that they were in the, you have to make sure that you don't cover breathing holes and things like that. But they would love it. I would go and buy a big thing of Scotch tape and we could have fun for an hour with a roll of Scotch tape. And I've never tried that with my child, but I'm sure he would find that, you know, they would tape their fingers together. And they found that just so reinforcing. Wasn't the word I would have thought of at that time, but they loved it. And loved if you got out the roll of tape. So it's amazing the things that you could do if you think outside the box. And we did have a list of, it was exhaustive, of things that you could try, but I do love this idea of thinking of it as a starter thing that, you know, because it isn't reinforcing unless it encourages a behavior.
Yeah, and we're all different. They're all different. And of course they lose their power too. Like if you do something too much, then it's not going to work anymore and you need to go and find something else. So it is good to have like a bunch of stuff and to be trying new things all the time. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Doesn't matter.
Let go of it.
It's no big deal. If the kid looks at you like, what are you doing? It's okay, just try something else.
Yes, I can see that very much right now. We're in a phase where the things that I used to do that he liked, no longer, I'm not allowed to sing in the grocery store aisle anymore. It's embarrassing now. It's just an age. It's just devastating to me. But so important that we reinforce them. And what about praise? I mean, praise is a pretty big reinforcer.
It is. It's not necessarily for our kids, though, the primary thing that's going to motivate them, and it takes work to sometimes pair it with other things. That's the other thing about reinforcers, is that sometimes, you know, it takes a bit of time for something to become a reinforcer.
Right.
So when you present it, especially if it's something the child's never come in contact with before, they may just be not interested, but you need to just keep presenting it and showing them what to do with it and showing them all the things you can do with it, and eventually you'll find like that becomes something that's very rewarding for them. And then so with the praise, it's the same idea that we'll notice if you do have therapists coming into the home that they'll always be pairing praise with something else initially. And what they're trying to do is that hoping that the properties, like the reinforcing, rewarding properties of this toy or whatever it is, will transfer onto the praise just by presenting them together all the time. Exactly. And that's the goal.
Right, because we want for praise to be reinforcing for them. But like so many things, I mean, I can think of things as I was a child and becoming an adult, I did not find reinforcing that I do now. I think we all have our tastes change and things. You know, I would never have said that changing the sheets on a bed was going to be reinforcing to me ever on any planet, but it is to me now. There's such a feeling of accomplishment, and I, you know, love the feeling of when you get into you brought up the smell of the clean sheet. That's very reinforcing to me now. And when I was 14, you could have promised me that I would have found it reinforcing to make a bed, and I would have assured you not, right? So the same can be true for our kids, that we can make praise reinforcing if we're mindful about it and pair it with all those other things that are reinforcing. Any last minute advice for us, because we're pretty much out of time, about reinforcers?
I think be creative, just to let your creativity flow and ask other people, observe other kids, see what motivates them, and not just thinking about things, thinking about like the fact that social stuff and the feel of things, and not just toys and video games. We're thinking about anything that gets the person to do something good or that you're concentrating on.
And sometimes it can be just spending time with them. Is a really great reinforcer.
Attention is very powerful.
Yes, it is. Yes,
and whether that's negative or positive, that's the problem. It's like any kind of attention is very powerful for all human beings.
That's true. Very true. Well, I thank you so much. We'll continue to talk about reinforcement because I don't think we could ever be done talking about it. And if you guys have questions about reinforcers after Evelyn leaves us, you can absolutely send us questions. We know where Evelyn works, and we can talk to her other days besides Tuesdays. But thank you so much for being with us. It's always a pleasure. We're going to take a break and come back to finish out the show. Stick with us.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining me today. For the month of December, we're going to be making wrapping paper. The skills we'll be focusing on today are pattern making, which is an academic skill. While you're doing this, you can also work on colors and shapes with your child. The materials you'll be needing are brown paper bag, paint, water, paintbrush, a tray or paper plate, paper towel, a sharp knife, which the adult will be the only one using, scissors, cookie cutters, and potatoes. And of course, you can always use pre-made stamps or sponges to use. All right, let's get to it. The first thing you want to do is you're going to take your potato and you're going to cut it in half. So now I've got 2 stamps I could possibly use. So I'm going to make a star, and you can always do this freehand. I like the cookie cutters because it makes it a little bit easier. I'm going to take the cookie cutter, I'm going to squish that in there. Then I'm going to take my knife, I'm going to cut along the edge, and then I'm going to pop it out. And voila! Now that I've done this, I'm going to peel out the potato and pull this out, and ta-da! There's my star. I'll be taking my recyclable paper bag and cutting it open. I'm just cutting along the edge. Now that I have this done, I'm going to remove the handles, like so. And then here you are. All right, now that I have this ready, it's a great time to have the kids join in. So I'm grabbing my reusable plate, and while you're squeezing out the paints to use, this is a great time to have your kids label the different colors and to discuss how to mix the colors together to make secondary colors. Now that I have my paint and my stamps ready, well, now it's time to start making the fun patterns. So I've got my piece of paper in front of me. I'm going to take my star stamp and I'm going to just dip it in the green paint I just mixed. See that there? And now I'm going to place it onto my paper. Depending on the skill of your child, when you grab your stamps, you can ask them to label the shapes. You can start making the pattern, and I can ask my child questions like, what comes next? Or have them come up with the pattern themselves, just straight from their head. Here are a few examples of wrapping paper that I completed today. When you complete your wrapping paper, again, I hope you take a photo of it and share it with us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/autismlive. I look forward to seeing them and seeing you next month. Bye.
Can you see me? Can you see me flying by your side?
Welcome back to Autism Live. I had promised we were going to get to the question of the day and your answers, and I wanted to get to yesterday's too because we didn't have a chance to do it. So today I asked you guys, what is the last thing that you bought for yourself just because? And overwhelmingly you guys wrote, and I said it's important that you guys say this so people can see it. Overwhelmingly you guys wrote that you couldn't remember. And how many of you commented on how sad that was that you couldn't remember. I don't think there's anything sad about it because you're amazing parents. And some of you were laughing about it, I don't remember. And the things that you guys did write in about, I think are noteworthy. Somebody wrote in and said, I needed new eyeliner, woohoo, living it up over here, bless your heart. Someone else said, I broke down and got some embroidery floss. Somebody else who had said a pair of jeans from the thrift store. Does that count? Because I gained weight and I needed them. And really it was supposed to be just because you bought it just because. So no, when you desperately need something, actually it doesn't count. Another person who says, I don't remember. And someone else who says, for me, it's all about my kids. I have 5 children, 1 with autism. I would rather spend my last dime on them than myself. The needs of a child are never ending. And someone else said they're just needing some bonbons, LOL. Someone else who said a pair of yoga pants. And another person who said mascara. Yes, amazing. And another person who said, I just don't know. Now, yesterday, we asked you, our question of the day was, what do you wish you could afford? I just know that these are going to make me well up. But it's important to say these things, and it's important to dream. Somebody who wrote Christmas gifts. Someone else who says ABA therapy for my daughter. Another person who says, a tutor for my son's math class. I'm sure that he would be able to excel if he had someone who understood how he thinks and could teach him appropriately. Someone else says, make millions and donate some to different charities for Christmas. And someone else says the therapy that will be needed. Another person who says the one gift I would love to give my great niece who has autism would be health insurance that would cover all of her needs. She has Medicaid, and there are a few places that will take it out of the very few in the area that deal with the spectrum. Another person who says, I wish I could afford to buy an iPad for my autistic son for Christmas. He plays on one in school, and he loves it. Someone else who says all the learning tools my son needs, like an iPad with endless apps that I don't have to pay for. Someone else says a babysitter. These are, of course, answering the question, what do you wish that you could afford? Someone else says a speech therapist. Someone else says, take my son to the Amen Clinic in Washington, D.C. and provide all the therapies and treatments available. Someone else who says ABA therapy for my daughter, and they wrote, insurance companies suck. We're just keeping it real here, right? Another person who says a trained, sensitive coach to work one-on-one with my sister, and then to handpick those who are qualified to work with her. Someone else says, knowing what Christmas present would make my son happy. Something so simple but so hard since he's not able to express himself. I take him to the Toys R Us and I ask him to pick something, but he's overwhelmed by everything going on and not able to choose something he really likes. It's like you have to buy 10, if not more, toys, and out of those 10, he will really like one, plus they have to be out of the box for him to look at it. You know, and that's... I would encourage you to ask your local support group and say, could we get together and play with some toys? And there are ways around some of these things. And one of the things that we often did was that if we had a play date and if we went to somebody else's, then we had an opportunity to see which toys he would find really reinforcing. And there are some toy stores who will let you take a toy out of the box and play with it and return it if you tell them what's going on, so that you don't have to buy 10 that you don't end up using. Another person who says a swimming pool for therapy and enjoyment, keep playing the lottery and dreaming, LOL. It's okay to dream. It is okay for us to dream. Another person who says therapy for my 17-year-old son with Asperger's to help with preparing for college and society. His father died when he was 9, and Social Security stopped helping us when he turned 16, which impacted my ability to get to a career in order to build a foundation. Get to career in order to build a foundation. Devastating, right? Another person who says, a trip back to Buffalo to see all my family. My son is always asking when it's been 1.5 years since we've moved. Someone else, ABA therapy and a shadow teacher for my daughter. Again, a sensory room filled with all of the equipment that is at her OT and PT clinic. Seriously, my daughter has to use our office chair, which is very old, as a means of spinning to regulate her vestibular needs. I'd even like to just be able to afford a quality outdoor swing set that has the basic sensory and muscle weakness tools like slides, steps, ladders, swings, gliders, tire swings, etc. I'd especially like to be able to afford to consult with my daughter's doctor whenever needed, along with the supplements she needs. More ABA would also be great. Another person who says Christmas presents, a car. It's so hard to be stuck without transportation with 3 going on 4 kids. It reminds us of all the things that we have, right? Another person says a newer van for my family. Someone else says a weighted blanket for therapy. Someone else says to get my health back. And health is one of the biggest gifts, right? Okay, another person who says, I would have to say to afford to buy my daughter lots of different toys when we're at Toys R Us so I could know which toys she enjoys playing with. She gets so overwhelmed when we're at the toy store. So another person sharing the same thing, she will either grab any toy or request to leave without any. It is really heartbreaking for her dad and me. Again, I think that if you were to call your local toy store, they would be willing to make an accommodation for you. And maybe we'll spend some time talking about that. To be able to afford sensory integration products, toys for my son. A private BCBA and ABA therapist that is not a school employee, but we're overseas and services for my son's need in the school environment. But overseas and services my son's needs in the school environment. I see. To send all the school staff that work with my son to a 2-day ABA training and pay for accommodations because we live so rural. After school social skills programming for my son, a nanny that is ABA trained so my husband can get away for more than one night and stay away later than noon the next day. Okay, done. Love it. Somebody else who says, oh yeah, an indoor pool, a Christmas tree. And someone else says everything. These are brilliant, and there are so many more of them. I could scroll down and just go on forever. These are important. They're important for so many reasons, so we see the kinds of things that people need, so we remember to be grateful, right, for what we have. And it's important to dream, because sometimes things happen. So I'm going to dream with you that these things can happen. I'm going to remind you that one of the things that we always want to is information, and Dr. Doreen Grant-Pichet will be here tomorrow, and she has information, and that's a powerful thing. Then tomorrow, for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, we have some really incredible people who are going to be joining us. A very important film that has come out called The Story of Luke, which features a young man on the autism spectrum. We're going to have not only the director and writer, but the producer and the star of the film tomorrow with us to talk about this important film that we all need to know about. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.